What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 34 of my weekly Q&A. My name is Danny Segura, and yes, bienvenidos to my weekly live Q&A where I answer all your questions regarding the combat sports world and more. So, pretty simple. You guys have submitted questions via Twitter, and I'm going to answer them. At the end of this video, or I should say in the later part of this video, I will take to the questions being asked on the YouTube live chat. So if you didn't get a chance to ask preliminary questions via Twitter, you can do so right now and throw some on the YouTube live chat, and I'll get to those, like I said, in the later part of this video. Sounds good? So a lot to talk about, obviously, with a maybe big weekend, kind of. Obviously, a historic weekend for Bellator with UFC, with Bellator Paris, Bellator France. Obviously, the first major event in France, so that was kind of special. But the card itself wasn't that great. And then we had UFC Fight Island 5, which was a great card. Actually, I had a lot of fun watching it. But in the grand scheme of things, it maybe didn't have. There wasn't there wasn't that much at stake, I would say, as compared to like other cards. Say the one versus Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley and a few others. But either way, it was a good weekend of MMA, and then we got a solid weekend coming up with UFC Fight Island 6. Which is a pretty nice card as well. Ortega versus the Korean Zombie. I'm very much looking forward to that fight. And then we got Bellator fights on Thursday. That's going to be weird. Haven't seen a Thursday card in quite some time, at least here in North America. So that's going to be kind of interesting and fun to watch. I love during the week cards. I think those are the best. I don't mind the Saturday slot. The Friday one was like, that's the one that Bellator was using. But now Bellator's transitioning with this CBS Sports Network deal. They're going to start having Thursday cards. So I think that's going to be quite nice. So we'll see how it actually shakes out and the whole feel of it and everything. But I think it's going to be nice. All right. So we'll get started here in a second. Sipping here on my Colombian coffee. All right, so let's get this started. So the first question is by Darby Crash 81, and he asks, Tony Ferguson stood up for Poirier while declining any other fights, and now the talk is the later fighting McGregor in a huge pay-per-view while Tony is left in the cold. Doesn't this prove that every fighter should just look out for themselves and the heck with everyone else? You said it. Yeah, this whole situation quite sucks for Tony Ferguson, but at the same time, it's like, dude, what do you expect? You know what I'm saying? This is, Corey Sandhagen said it best at the post-fight presser when he defeated Marlon Moraes, and he said this is a dog sport, and that's 100% true. Some people's misfortunes are gonna be some people's opportunities. Just rewind Khabib pulling out of, UFC 249, right? Obviously, because of the whole world going into lockdown and the travel restrictions. That sucks for Khabib. He missed out on a huge payday, on a huge fight with Tony Ferguson, on a chance to defend his title and extend his legacy. But that was Justin Gaethje's fortune, and then he became the UFC interim lightweight champion because of that. And like that, injuries, Pete, right? Look at Daniel Cormier. Imagine if John Jones wouldn't have had all those like PED suspensions and sort of troubles with the law that kept him outside of the octagon, that got him stripped from his belt. Cormier probably would have never been champ, right? So again, this is a sport where a lot of people benefit from others' misfortunes, and Tony Ferguson should know that. And I appreciate his sort of his heart. I appreciate him trying to be nice and stand up for Dustin Poirier and try to like make a case for the guy to get a decent payday to fight him. I'm all for that. That's certainly nice. I'm not bagging on that. But given what we know about the sport, usually when you take that kind of stance, it doesn't really turn out too well for you. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where like you should have known better, and it is what it is. You know what I'm saying? One of the very reasons why I don't think there will be a fighters union anytime soon. Again, the moment you get what you want, you move on, right? You don't really look out for others in mixed martial arts. So, yeah, it sucks for Tony Ferguson. if I were him, I would have taken that Chandler fight for the co-main event at UFC 254. It would have served a nice little slot as well for you to be a replacement opponent. Because if you think about it, Michael Chandler right now is being pegged as the replacement opponent for that title fight, right? Justin Gaethje versus, or should I say, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje. And I guarantee you, and that's just because there's no one else in the mix. I guarantee you, if Tony Ferguson would have been on the card, they would have 100% rather made a Tony Ferguson fight. Unless, actually, no, that would be different. If Khabib were the one to pull out and it'd be Justin Gaethje, I don't think they would make Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson too. But certainly they would go with the Chandler route. But the other way around, right? If Justin Gaethje were to pull out, I think they would much rather go Khabib versus Tony Ferguson than Khabib versus Michael Chandler. I don't know. That's sort of my guess. He's just a bigger name, a bigger star. That fight's actually built up. So from a logistical standpoint, it would have been a lot easier to promote on short notice, right? There's so many videos, so many countdowns, so many interviews that they've done talking about each other, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And it would have been kind of poetic if all that situation goes down, right? Or if it would have gone down. That Tony Ferguson ends up fighting Khabib Nurmagomedov on short notice, something not planned, right? So that kind of would have been the storyline. But anyways, like you said, who asked this question again? Darby Crash 81. Yeah, I mean, it proves that in this sport, you just got to look out after yourself. Maybe your teammates, if they're in other weight classes, right? We've seen some fighters look out after other fighters to their detriment, right? Like Daniel Cormier, knowing that he's a better heavyweight than a light heavyweight, still compromising himself to drop to 205 pounds just so he wouldn't fight his friend Cain Velasquez and sort of become a threat in that division, right? So we've seen certain things like that. But if certainly when it comes down to looking out for others, especially your fellow opponents, I don't think that works out too well, especially in this case, right? So, yeah, Tony Ferguson got kind of screwed, but it was a bit of his own fault if we're being honest here. A Pass of Wokeness, the biggest Dustin Poirier hater, is back. And he asks, out of this past weekend and next weekend, which 145 or 155 on Fight Island do you think would turn around and fight Islam in 2 weeks? Seems like they're keeping Islam on the card still, and would realistically take and who could realistically take another fight? Take that fight. So great question. So for those that don't know, Rafael dos Anjos tested positive for COVID-19, was forced to withdraw from UFC 254. He was supposed to fight Islam Makhachev. That was going to be a pretty solid lightweight bout. Yeah, I really like that matchup. That was one of my favorite fights on the card. And all of a sudden, he's left without an opponent. They haven't said that they were going to reschedule it, like A Pass of Wokeness noted here. So it seems that Islam Makhachev is still going to be on the card. But finding short notice replacements, especially for Makhachev, that's going to be tough. Yeah, my hunch is that Makhachev doesn't end up fighting. I really don't think they're going to find someone on short notice for him, at least someone of decent caliber. They might find a newcomer somewhere. But certainly, I don't think they'll find someone with a name, someone that, is recognized and is willing to offer something in that fight, for Islam Makhachev. So let's look at some of the 45ers and 55ers that fought recently on Fight Island. Maybe that can give us a little bit of some insight maybe on some fighters that would be willing to take that fight. I mean, it's just such a tough fight stylistically too. Like, he's a specialist, so you want as much time as possible to be able to prepare for a specialist. So, yeah, nobody comes to mind. I'm looking at the previous cards right now. Let me see. Maybe somebody from the home Aldana card, that would kind of make sense a little bit timing wise. But even then, not really. Yeah, I mean, it's 2 weeks. A lot of people are saying that Chandler should take that fight, but he's already been discarded that. He's like, nope, I'm not taking that. He actually said that in an interview with George Garcia from MMA Junkie Radio. he was like, "Yeah, no, for me, it's either Tony Ferguson or title fight. Like, I'm not fighting Islam Makhachev." And I get it. I get it. It's a tough fight, and it's someone that doesn't really mean much as far as the rankings. Obviously, getting a win over Makhachev is nice, but it's not like getting a win over Tony Ferguson or somebody in the top five. So, um, yeah, I really see him having a hard time getting a fight. I mean, even before this booking, he was already having a tough time finding opponents, from what I've heard. I've actually spoken numerous times with Javier Mendez, his coach, and yeah, he's sort of expressed frustrations of how hard it is for the guy to find a fight. Because again, he doesn't have the biggest name. He's not super high up in the rankings, but the guy can beat. I wouldn't say everyone in the division, but the guy can certainly present problems to everyone in the division. I think that's fair to say, even the very best. So yeah, I don't think he fights at UFC 254, but who knows? Let's see. All right. A pass of wokeness back at it again, and he says, I checked Instagram. Chandler and I believe Justin are both still in America 2 weeks from the fight. Is that not crazy to fly this late when Khabib has been there for 4 or 5 weeks already? They're fighting on local time, so they should have been there already getting acclimated. Yeah, that's certainly a thing, but remember, these guys rely on the UFC to bring them over to Abu Dhabi, right? Whereas Khabib Nurmagomedov doesn't do that. He goes there on his own dime. He goes there on his own time. So, yeah, he's done the smart move. And in some ways, even though that's not his home country, it's always been seen as his home turf when it comes down to fighting. And it's because it's, close to where he lives, right? In a similar part of the world of where he's from. And he can just, go over there, a lot easier than other fighters, right? Maybe visa-wise and other things, it becomes a lot easier for Khabib Nurmagomedov to get into Abu Dhabi than others. So that's one thing. And yes, I agree with you. I mean, ideally, you want to be at the place you're fighting for a while to get acclimated to the food, to get acclimated to, the weather. The time is a huge one, especially if you're coming from a different time zone. Yeah, a bunch of things, certainly, that's going to play in Khabib's favor, for sure. I mean, ask yourself this. Would you rather fight Khabib in Abu Dhabi? I mean, nobody would want to fight Khabib, but would you rather fight Khabib in Abu Dhabi, or would you rather fight Khabib in the States, right? I think you would want him to come over to the States as opposed to going all the way to Abu Dhabi. It's just a lot tougher. I mean, the same thing goes with Brazilians. Like, fighting in Brazil is definitely a thing. Like, it's not as... I feel like for some time it was kind of played out in the media, but then it kind of died down, but... You kind of really think, oh, well, it's the same octagon, it's the same thing, whatever. But, like, you talk to fighters, especially, like, off camera or, off record, and they're like, yeah, Brazil, like, fuck that. I'm not going there. Like, it's an amazing country, but, like, to fight there, fight somebody from there, it certainly adds to the experience, and it's certainly an uphill battle. So, yeah, it's gonna be an uphill battle for Gaethje, keeping in mind that Khabib has been acclimated to everything there. So he's been there for quite some time. If you guys don't follow Javi Mendez on Instagram, I think you guys should all do it right after this stream. He's a great follow. He posts great content, but on top of just being funny and just having like good Instagram content, he puts stuff a lot about like the training and stuff like that. So you really get a good insight into what Khabib camp is right now. So that's been kind of nice. I've been keeping a close eye on that. I think he's gonna be on the next episode of Hablemos MMA. We're still yet coordinating some things, but that's sort of the plan as of now. All right, the Dill Daddy says, thoughts on several PFL fighters potentially pursuing legal actions against PFL for not fighting. So this one has been an interesting story. I've kind of kept a close eye on it. I wouldn't say I'm like the most expert. I know I've seen some of the tweets that Lance Palmer has pulled out. Let me see if there's what's the latest on that. But yeah, apparently Lance Palmer, two-time tournament winner of PFL, right? He's won $2 million. He's suing the PFL precisely for the way they've handled the this whole pandemic, right? They basically canceled the 2020 season and they are set to return in spring of 2021. So that's kept a lot of fighters on the shelf. I mean, he's, I would say, one of the lucky ones because he actually won 2 tournaments. So he's got $2 million in the bag. Whereas others, I'm curious to see how much money they've made in the tournament without actually winning the ultimate price, which is that $1 million payday. So certainly, I would say it's hurting other fighters a lot more than he is, or I'm assuming. I mean, I don't know his financials, but let's see here. Yeah, so basically, yeah, those are sort of the plans to sue the PFL, and I think other fighters are involved as well. And I see both sides. Like, it's certainly tough. I mean, these are unprecedented times, right? So to get it right, it's so difficult. I mean, think about this. Like, think about this. The UFC were the ones that were sort of the promotion that was trying to get back the quickest, and they got a shit ton of hate. But in the end, they got it right, more or less. I mean, we're seeing a pretty safe product. Yes, there's like positive COVID tests here and there, but they've done a good job at sort of isolating that and making sure those fighters are withdrawn from the card and making sure they get healthy before they can get rescheduled to fight again, right? I think part of that was the sort of push, the backlash they got from fans and media. People think like, oh, media just is sort of this annoyance thing, but they actually, we actually have an important role in like asking the right questions and this and that. I think if it wasn't because, again, the New York Times got involved, big publications got involved into what the UFC was trying to do, basically host fights without absolutely no testing or no COVID protocol. And that eventually, freaking the governor of California had to call Disney and be like, yo, you guys got to stop this. Obviously, Disney being the owner of ESPN, the UFC's broadcasting partner. So in the end, I guess the media and just the public and these government agencies did keep the UFC in check, but they still sort of went straight ahead and came back as soon as possible. And as soon as they had a COVID protocol, and it seems their COVID protocol was pretty legit, then you get Bellator, right, who erred more on the side of caution, but still with some sort of urgency to return. And we saw them return like, what, a month and a half ago with Bellator 243, if I'm not mistaken. And then you get the PFL, who totally did, the complete opposite. I think Bellator's right down the middle, where they're like, yeah, we are not taking any gambles. This whole season's canceled. Peace out. See you in 2021. So, again, at the time where they made the decision, it just really seemed like, not that this pandemic has been good, because it hasn't. It's been, quite shitty. But, I mean, I remember hearing the news about potentially having 1 million people dying. Sure, 200,000 people is not good that have passed away just in the U.S. alone. But when we're talking about millions, I mean, it's safe to say that, it's been a lot better, the pandemic, than what maybe some experts initially thought it would be. Now, could have maybe still be handled better. Okay, that's a separate discussion. But anyway, so at the time they made the decision, like, there was very little information about the virus, about how this whole thing was going to end up. So, a lot of people even questions if there were ever going to be sports in 2020. Like, there was a real conversation about sports being canceled really for almost an entire year. So I don't blame them for that. But I do think that they could do some other things to give fighters fights, because it's not just about the money. It's also about their careers. I mean, I don't know. Let's pull up Lance Palmer's age here. He's the one sort of leading the charge here in this lawsuit. But Lance Palmer is no rookie. He's been around the game for quite some time. He's 32 years old. So a year of his life, as far as his MMA career, is a lot of time. I mean, from 32 to 33, right? Like, that's a big jump, right? You could make the case that the guy maybe, I don't know, even if he stays in amazing shape, right? Like, maybe he can stay competitive till 34, 35, right? I mean, if you're a freak athlete, which he is, maybe 36. But again, these are the years where These are your prime years. These are the years where you get paid the most. These are the years where you got the most experience, where your body's in the best shape of its life, right? And you want to make the most of it. So it's about that as well, not just about the money. And also, the PFL let go some fighters, kept some, and also released a monthly stipend, which I've heard is $1,000 a month. Sure, that's nice, but like at the end of the day, what does $1,000 get you, right? Like not much. Shit, I can't even pay my rent with that. Like back in New York, you know what I'm saying? So, if you and you know, I'm a single dude with no kids or no family or anything like that. So, imagine like someone that has like a family to feed, other bills and sort of a lot more responsibilities. Like $1,000 a month doesn't really do much. So, again, I completely understand the fighters' frustrations, and they definitely got a case. I also see the case for the PFL because, like, look, these are unprecedented times. Like, I mean, who the hell knew a pandemic was coming, right? And but a contract's a contract, so it's gonna get weird and interesting as far as what goes down between them and that. If they do move forward with that lawsuit. I think the PFL could have saved themselves some of this a little bit. Okay, fine. Don't host the tournament. Postpone the tournament till 2021. But just because you don't have a tournament, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't have fights, right? Just host regular fights. Fights that don't mean anything for the tournament, right? Just make a PFL card to keep your fighters busy, to keep your fighters from earning some money, right? Again, that's gonna take dealing with a COVID protocol and sticking by sort of the laws, right, that require you to that require um, that you're required to have in order to have events, right? But again, that's part of the world we live in right now, and unless we get a vaccine and everyone takes it and all that, this thing's getting, that's sort of going to be the case. You're going to have safety protocols when it comes to COVID. But look, the UFC has done a great job in laying out sort of the sort of the sort of what would you call it? Sort of the protocol, the sort of the plan that you need to follow in order to host an event during a pandemic, right? And Bellator certainly, I'm sure they kept a close eye while the UFC was having events. They certainly picked some things they liked, obviously some things that you have to have. They added their own, but certainly they're following in the UFC's footsteps. And so far, they've been pretty successful with their return. I think the PFL can do that, especially since the UFC has already laid out that path. Again, just host PFL cards, 2-3 cards before the year end, and I'm sure you would keep your fighters a lot happy, and then come back with the 2021 season. So, again, I see both sides, but I also think there's some things that the PFL could do in order to save themselves these troubles, per se. I believe we got 2 more questions. Oh, no, we don't. But these are quick ones. All right. What makes a champion the most money? Headlining pay-per-view or undercarding a Conor McGregor fight? Good question. So usually a lot of fighters do want to be, especially if they're champions, do want to be on a Conor McGregor pay-per-view because they get a cut of that pie. And obviously a Conor McGregor pay-per-view is a hefty one, so you're going to get a fair amount, a generous amount of money from pay-per-view buys. But look, if you're also a big draw like Jon Jones and others, like, it depends. I mean, I'm sure there are certain tiers, right? If you're headlining a card, you probably get the biggest cut, right? If you're co-main event or maybe a little down from the co-main event, say like the third fight, maybe you'd get a little bit less, right? So it's hard to know without getting like exact numbers on how the UFC distributes their revenue share, their pay-per-view revenue share with its athletes. But yeah, it all depends, right? Again, if you're also a big star like Jon Jones and you have a really good rivalry like the Daniel Cormier one, maybe you do want to be a main event and be on your own because you get a bigger cut and your rivalry is drawing a lot of eyes, right? But say if you're a champion like, I don't know, Demetrius Johnson back in the day, right? Or Peter Yan, or who's a flyweight champion? I'm blanking right now. Davison Figueredo, Jesus Christ. You know, maybe those guys do want to be on a Conor McGregor pay-per-view because on their own they're probably not going to sell much, right? So I think it kind of all depends from case to case. I think it goes. I think it's a case to case thing. All right. The Seaside says prediction for Cyborg. So again, so Chris Cyborg fights this weekend. This Thursday. What am I talking about? And it's gonna be a good fight. I mean, to be honest, I don't know a whole lot about her opponent, but I do remember her vividly defeating Leslie Smith in Bellator. I think it's Leslie Smith only defeat in Bellator. So certainly someone that's capable. I mean, you can't suck and beat Leslie Smith. You just can't. You have to be at least a decent fighter. At the very least, a decent fighter with a very good night. That gets you by Leslie Smith. But otherwise, you have to be a pretty good fighter to be a seasoned veteran like Smith. And then I know she's picked up a few other victories. Let me pull her up here. So actually, she hasn't fought since November of 2019. Actually, that was actually her last bout, the Leslie Smith one. That's probably why I don't have a very clear picture of her in my head right now because she's been fairly inactive. And yeah, she only fought twice in 2019, only fought once in 2018, and then she did have a busy 2017 with 4 fights. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, she's certainly been around the block. She has 20 fights under her record. She has a bit of a boxing record. I mean, all these things don't matter when you're facing Chris Cyborg, really. I think there's only one person that can beat Chris Cyborg, and that's Amanda Nunes. Other than that, Chris Cyborg will beat anybody else. So I don't think this will be any different. I think Chris Cyborg is going to defend her title and pick up another W here. So, yeah. All right, let's see here. Let me pull up that Bellator card. I think it's a pretty good one. I don't know right now what other fights are on that card. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, Patricky Pitbull's fighting. That's going to be nice. Ricky Bandejas is fighting Leandro Higo. That's a fun fight. I like both fighters. Saad Awad is opening up the main card. Curtis Millender versus Joe Schilling. Yes. I completely forgot about the fight. That was the fight that was sort of reminding me this card was good, but wasn't coming up to mind. I'm having an off morning. But anyways, yeah, Curtis Millender, I've been a huge fan of his. I didn't really understand why he got cut from the UFC. Yes, he had some losses, but I feel like he is a very exciting fighter. In fact, he's actually won a Performance of the Night bonus within the UFC. He had a winning record, right? He had a 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 4-3 in the UFC. I mean, certainly not good, but it's not the worst. Wait, no, what am I talking about? Oh no, 3-2. My bad. 3-2 in the UFC. So again, certainly not the worst record, but not the best either. But I think given his style and some of the wins he picked up, I mean, he beat Thiago Alves, he beat Max Griffin, he beat Sierra Bahar Dusarda. Those are solid guys. I mean, that's a nice little win streak. So keeping that in mind, you would think they would keep him around, especially because he lost to Eliseo Saliki dos Santos, who's a stud at 170, and Bilal Muhammad, who probably should be ranked. So again, he lost the top of position there. But anyways, I'm a huge fan of his. I think his striking is very good. I think he needs a lot of work in his ground game, but that doesn't really matter here because he's fighting Joe Schilling, a decorated kickboxer. So yeah, that should be a fun stand-up fight. And then right below that, it's just a bunch of fighters I don't know all that well. So that's usually how Bellator programs their cards anyways. Their prelim cards are kind of trying to find gems, not necessarily the biggest names. And then the main card is where you can find the beef. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, Millender versus Joe Schilling, great card. Saad Awad, again, always a fun fighter to watch. Ricky Bandejas versus Leandro Higo, excellent fight. Patricky Pitbull returning, and then Cyborg defending her title. That's a pretty solid lineup right there. And I'll definitely be tuning into that. All right. The Dill Daddy back at it again. He says, what is your prediction for Leon Edwards' next fight? And who would you match him with? So great question. One that's constantly being asked. I think I was asked this question in the last couple of live Q&As that I've done. And sort of my answers is still the same. I mean, after that Stephen Wonderboy Thompson call out, you just have to go that route. I mean, it's a top guy. It's a two-time former UFC title challenger, is one of the bigger names in the division, a guy who I believe is ranked in the top 5, literally asking to fight you. And Leon Edwards has been complaining about not being able to secure a top-level opponent, not being able to secure somebody really high up in the rankings. You know, basically saying everyone's ducking him. And there's something to that because, you know, he is a very skilled fighter and he doesn't have the biggest name in the world. So for fighters, there's not much return in beating Leon Edwards. You can make a case that beating Nate Diaz would do a lot more for your career than beating Leon Edwards, who's ranked much higher than Diaz, who's won a lot more fight than Nate Diaz in recent years, who's just fought more and been more relevant than Nate Diaz in recent years, right? But yeah, so again, this is a weird one because you finally get a guy calling you out that's in the top, that has a big name, and he's been radio silent. I actually reached out to his team a little bit ago, kind of, maybe like a week ago. I don't quite remember. For an interview, but I haven't heard back. But yeah, it's one of those things. It kind of just seems like a no-brainer. Let me pull up his record here. So yeah, I would go the Stephen Wonderboy route. I think that is a great bout stylistically. I'm very curious to see how a fight like that would play out. I think it makes sense for both guys. I think right now, Wonderboy Thompson, I mean, his last bout last November, I was there in person when he fought Vicente Luque, and he looked fantastic. So I've always been curious to see how he follows up from that performance. I would say one of the best performances of his career. Obviously, the pandemic hit, so that's hindered him. But yeah, I want to see how he does against top opposition. No disrespect to Vicente Luque. I think the world of him. I think he's a fantastic fighter. He's just not there yet. I mean, I really do think he's going to become top 5 eventually, even challenge for a title. But at this point in time, he's just not there. He's a top 10 for sure, but he's just not a top 5. So anyways, I'm curious to see what Wonderboy Thompson does with a top 5. And the top 5 is Leon Edwards. And I think Leon Edwards definitely needs a big name. It just makes perfect sense. But I have no reason why he hasn't really responded to that call out. And a lot of people are saying, well, it's a bad stylistic matchup for Leon. I think, a lot of people are saying that Leon might lose that one, so that's why he doesn't want it. Certainly, there's always a chance he could lose it. I mean, Thompson is a game opponent, but I would favor Leon in that fight. I think I would, if I had to bet money, I would bet money on him to beat Wonderboy. I wouldn't say it'd be a wash, but I feel like he gets it done. So again, I don't know. That's a weird one, but yeah, I would go with Edwards versus Stephen Thompson. I think that's the move. All right. So remember, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now, this is the part where I switch things up and I go over to the YouTube live chat to answer your questions. So again, if you didn't get to ask via Twitter, no worries. Just throw some stuff in the YouTube live chat and I'll get to it now. Sounds good? All right. Alex Howie. Thoughts on the UFC-Reebok deal coming to an end in a few months, considering they have only paid out a little over $36 million of the $80 they got for the 6-year deal. I think it was $70, but either way, yeah, that's a very interesting one. I think if I ever get a chance to go to another event, because right now, yeah, that's definitely an interesting question. I think it'll become a little more relevant the closer we get to the end of that deal, right? Obviously, at this point in time, there are other things that might be a little more pressing. But when that deal gets closer to come to an end, I think, yeah, all these questions are going to become more relevant. And I would like to see someone, I don't know if someone has already, maybe I'm wrong, but asked Dana White exactly that. I mean, he said, I remember that vividly. He said all the money was going to the fighters. And I think it was not 80 million. I think it was 70 million. But either way, 80, 70, whatever. Um, all the money was 100% going to the fighters. And we've seen only about half of it go to the fighters. So that raises some eyebrows, right? So I would like to see someone ask that question to Dana White because I think it's important. I think it's important. And I also would like to know more details about the Venom deal. I don't think there's been, besides the Venom taking over the sort of sponsorship duties here with the UFC, I don't think we've heard much beyond that. So I'd love to see if they're going to do some sort of, I don't know, some fight kits, kind of like what Reebok is doing with UFC fighters. I'm also curious to see how many UFC fighters made money from the fight kits. Apparently that was like a thing too, but haven't heard much about it. Yeah, there's a bunch of questions with the Reebok deal, but my overall thoughts, to be honest, it sucked. If I'm giving you my honest opinion, I remember interviewing Alex Caceres because he had a weird thing where it's like he fought right at the end of like the regular era where you can just have whatever sponsor, and then he had a long layoff. So I remember the Reebok deal had already been, in process for like maybe like a year or something, and he was just going to return. And again, he's one of these fighters that is known for being flashy, is known for having a very strong personality. And I interviewed him about sort of the Reebok deal, and he's like, yeah, dude, this like draws personalities. Again, I want to be able to express myself at the fullest. And when you got somebody telling you that you can only wear Reebok products and you only have a very small selection, it certainly hinders the way you express yourself. And look, I'm all about self-expression. I'm a mixed martial artist. That's my whole thing. And I do think that the Reebok deal has drowned a lot of personalities. For example, the Henry Cejudo gold trunks, the Anderson Silva, yellow black trunks. I mean, there are so many like things about the equipment that make a fighter a fighter. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's awesome. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the boxing pageantry that they have there and how much boxers are able to showcase their personality through, again, almost everything. Not only their fighting style, not only what they say in their interviews, but again, the equipment. And I think Reebok sort of dropped the ball on that. On top of that, the kits were never really nice, to be quite honest. I mean, they weren't bad. Certainly the shorts that we see now are not bad. I think they're decent. I would actually say they're good. But the early Reebok stuff was just not good. It was very plain, very dull. And again, it seemed very uniform. I think that's exactly what they were trying to do. And I mean, if that was their goal, then mission accomplished. But again, in fighting, I want to see some personality. So I wasn't a huge fan of the deal. Now, as far as the pay, I think there are some things that maybe some people, especially in media and fans, are not taking into consideration. Obviously, we've seen the reports, the story on how fighters have been greatly affected by the Reebok purses. Obviously, Conor McGregor, say like Demetrius Johnson, he lost his Xbox sponsorship because of Reebok. I'm sure Xbox paid him a lot more money than Reebok, right? So the Reebok purses haven't been all that great, haven't been all that big. But I'll say this, because I've spoken to a few fighters from Latin America, and those guys have a harder time getting sponsors. And, say like a country like Colombia, they're not going to pay you $50,000 to rock your, whatever sponsor in the cage, where some American fighters maybe. So to fighters like that, the Reebok deal actually benefited them. And on top of that, they're getting paid in dollars. So certainly it's been good for some people, for some fighters, I would say. There's definitely this doom and gloom surrounding that deal. I think a lot of it is created by the media and fans as well. But there's been some good sides of it. I think a lot of the fighters from Latin America have benefited from this deal in not having to worry about getting sponsors. Again, sponsors in Latin America will probably not pay you all that much unless you're a really big star in those countries. And again, MMA is not as big there as it is in America. So a lot of fighters are not like huge superstars. That's been changing, but again, the Reebok deal, like you said, it's been around for 6 years now. So especially in its early days, I think a lot of fighters benefited from Latin American fighters benefited from the Reebok deal. Again, it's a weird, complex thing, but all in all, I think Reebok and the UFC dropped the ball a lot on many things. The designs, I mean, how many typos did they had in their names? The freedom, I think fine, have the, I don't know. Like, for example, remember when Donald Cerrone got fined from like stitching a like, I think it was part of a flag that like his grandfather gave him or something like that on his shorts. Like, that's not even like Nike brand or Adidas or anything else. It was literally like something custom made, and he got fined. And again, there's a lot of things that I didn't like about it. I think it was too strict, but I mean, it's over now. We'll see what happens and what sort of things they learn and they change from the Reebok deal and carry over to the Venom deal. But yeah, very, very complex topic. Yes, so glad I turned on my alerts. Yes, people, turn on your alerts. Important for this video, of course, for these live Q&As. You're the best, Danny. I love your analysis of the fights. Thank you very much. Kids, adventures, and toy games. Who would win a fight? Who would win a fight with you versus Ariel? He's bigger than me, but I think I'm stronger than him probably. And I mean, I think out of all the media members, and again, I'm not counting guys like Dan Hardy who like work in media, or like Brendan Shaw, who's a former UFC fighter like Dan Hardy and is now in media. But like news media, there are a lot of guys that train. I've heard Pete Carroll's got good jiu-jitsu, good leg locks apparently. And I know a few other guys train, but for the most part, most people don't. And again, one huge thing in mixed martial arts training and just combat sports training, just combat training in general, something that I've noticed is like the biggest gap in skill difference and what determines the most in a fight really is, and I've experienced this in jiu-jitsu a lot, from like 0 to like a year and a half to 2 years, it's almost as if months mattered. That's how crucial sort of the basics are. Now, after 2 years, I feel like someone that's been training for 2 years could potentially easily actually beat someone who's been training for 4 or 6 years, depending on how quickly that person was able to pick it up, how often they trained, the level of the teachings that they got. Right? It's different from getting taught by Marcelo Garcia than a blue belt, right? Or a black belt that might not be as decorated or might not have as much knowledge. So, but anyways, but from like 0 to like a year and a half, dude, if you've been training for like 2 months, the person that's been training for 6 is just gonna kick your ass, usually, unless maybe that person has like some background in wrestling or something like that. But for the most part, like those months are so crucial. So, anyways, so if a lot of guys haven't trained, I like my chances, man. I really do. I mean, I've been training jiu-jitsu for, so I got my blue belt I started in 2011. Whoops. I started in 2011. I got my blue belt in 2013. And I think till like 2015, I was very, very, very on point and very consistent with my jiu-jitsu. I mean, I was training 3 to 4 times a week, and I competed in tournaments. So prior to that, I had 2 years of high school wrestling experience. So I got a good deal in. And then after that, after I moved to New York City and, got a big boy job and started like working, part of the regular workforce, it gets a lot harder to stay consistent. But even then, like, I've managed to train a little bit, picked up a little bit of boxing, like, not trying to talk shit, but I like my chances against most media members, I would say. But yeah, I can't wait till this pandemic's over so I can start training jiu-jitsu again. But yeah, I like my chances, man. I like my chances. What do you think of Chandler denying Islam fight? I think it makes sense. I mean, he's a former Bellator champion. He's a guy that is in line right now to fight for the title. I mean, yes, he's a replacement opponent, but he's still being considered in that conversation to fight Islam Makhachev on what, short notice. I think the biggest thing is a short notice. I think overall, I wouldn't be opposed to that fight if it's like, hey, look, we got this fight in 6 weeks. Are you down? If you turn it down, I think maybe you go. I mean, even then, I kind of get it, but I think it'd be a different story. But on short notice against Islam, when you're already in line to fight for the belt, I mean, you're in standby, right? You've been discussed in potential fights with Dustin Poirier and Tony Ferguson. I mean, Islam Makhachev, I'm not trying to... I respect him, obviously. I think he's a great fighter. I'm a fan of his style and what he brings to the table. But it'd be a step down, you know? I mean, the guy's just not there. He's a young guy coming up, rising contender. And Chandler is established. I mean, he's a former world champion. So I have no problems with him denying that fight. I think it makes sense. And I think, he should wait to be a standby opponent to see if he steps into, save that main event. And if it doesn't work out and if both guys do end up fighting, then fight Tony Ferguson. I think that's the fight to make. It seems Dustin Poirier is going to fight Conor McGregor. So, fuck it. Just make Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chandler. Fantastic fight. I'm all in. Love it. I think that's the fight. All right. I'm going to answer a couple more and bounce out. Alex Howie, back at it again. Thoughts on MVP? Seeing a lot of people claiming he deserves a title shot. I don't agree. He hasn't fought anyone. No disrespect to the fighters he's fought. So he actually fought somebody in his last bout. I think a lot of people are dismissing that. The guy was unbeaten that he fought, Ross Houston. And he was also a former Cage Warriors champion. And I don't watch a lot of Cage Warriors, but I see the talent that comes out of Cage Warriors, especially the champions. And Cage Warriors, although a regional promotion, is a very, very good promotion. I mean, the level in that organization is quite high. So, if you're a world champion, a former world champion there, and you're unbeaten, you got to be legit, I'm not saying you're a top 5 UFC caliber type of guy, but you're certainly someone skilled. I mean, you can't win a world title at Cage Warriors and be unbeaten and be a shitty fighter. You just can't. And I think there, I think the haters are going to blow me up for this, but there is something to Michael Page's comments when he says, I'm not a can crusher. My style just makes fighters look bad. I think the truth lies in the middle. I don't necessarily agree 100% with his comments, but I don't necessarily dismiss him like a lot of fans are doing. Like, yeah, you just crush cans. No, the guy has beaten some solid guys, and he certainly has a style that proposes fights that could be boring. Or proposes fights that could lead to a crazy finish, and also makes fighters look bad. That's a fact. I mean, Paul Daly is a fantastic fighter. He is a UFC caliber fighter. I mean, the only reason why Paul Daly is not in the UFC and not ranked in the UFC right now, because I'm sure if he were to go in the UFC, he'd be in the top 15, is because he punched Josh Koscheck after a fight, and Dana White said that was unacceptable and kicked him out. Other than that, the guy was picking up legit wins and legit knockouts in the UFC. And in Bellator, I mean, he challenged for a world title, and he's been one of the top guys in that weight class for quite some time. And he made him look bad. Again, it was a boring fight, but his style made Paul Daly fight in a way that made Paul Daly look bad. I mean, you cannot look at that performance with Paul Daly and say that was one of his best performances. You can't say, that he looked good. He didn't. I mean, the guy knocks people out. He certainly has looked way better than that. So there is truth to Michael Page's comments. Now, has he fought cans? 100%. 100%. Has he fought some decent guys? Yeah. Has he fought the best of the best? Not much, just a little bit. Douglas Lima, MVP. That's about it. But there are other guys like Dave Rickles, Cyborg, right? Santos. There are some guys that are decent. This Houston guy, I mean, these are good guys, right? So I think there's a little bit of both. I think he is being fed not the best opposition, but at the same time, he does have a style that makes fighters look bad. So anyways, with that being said, I'm not ready to slam the book on him, but I will say this. I am starting to get a little bit frustrated at the type of matchmaking that he's been getting. Sure, the whole get spectacular knockouts, build your highlight reel, I think that had its time and it was needed. And I know a lot of people were complaining about it, but I certainly enjoyed it. But I think now it's time. I mean, the guy's like, what, 32, 33? Let me pull up his record here. It's time. It's time, dude. It's time to fight the top guys. It's time to rematch Paul Daly again. It's time to fight a Lawrence Larkin. It's time to fight a Neiman Gracie. It's time to take on the top guys of the division. And as far as a title shot, I mean, the guy's what, a nice little streak since the loss to Lima. He's like on a 3-4 fight win streak because he was quite busy last year. I don't know if you guys remember. So yeah, after the Lima fight, he fought 3 times in 2019, and he fought Lima in May. So September, November, December, he fought after losing to Lima. Picked up 3 wins, and now a 4th win over Houston. So 4-5 win streak at welterweight. I mean, it is something. I wouldn't hate it if he gets the title shot. In fact, because precisely I want to see him against top-level opposition. I think you guys want to see him against top-level opposition. So what's the complaint about him fighting Lima, right? I don't get it. Now, from here to the time that he fights Lima, because Lima's fighting at the end of this month against Gegard Mousasi at 185. No, I think it makes sense. Look, I think wait for that fight, and yeah, I think you make the Lima fight. Why not? Let's see what he's got against the top level opposition. Maybe he gets knocked out again. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. Let's find out. But let's see him against the top guys. I think he should fight Lima, and then you make Paul Daly versus Lorenz Larkin, or whoever he was gonna fight prior before he wasn't able to fight, because he was gonna fight recently and he couldn't because of, I think, weight issues. And then if win or lose, right? If Paul Daly wins, you make the rematch. Yeah, I think you fight Douglas Lima. MVP fights Douglas Lima, and then after that, you make the Paul Daly rematch. Obviously, if he loses, right? If he wins, you would need Paul Daly to pick up a victory in order to give him a title shot, right? Because he'd be the champion. But even then, I think maybe Bellator runs that back and gives him a rematch. So yeah, we'll see. But we'll see. But yeah, I'm getting kind of frustrated with the matchmaking that's been revolving around MVP, and I think it's time he fights top level opposition, right? And that's fighting Douglas Lima, the champion. That's fighting, Paul Daly again. That's fighting the Lawrence Larkin, the Neiman Gracies. I think that's the move. So yeah. All right, let's see here. I'll answer a couple more and dip out. Do you think Nate Diaz would be interested in a fight with Dan Hooker? I think most would have him as an underdog if they fought. Probably. Yeah, I would certainly favor Dan Hooker in a fight with Nate Diaz. But no, he wouldn't be interested in fighting Dan Hooker. I mean, Dustin Poirier, who's not as big of a star as Nate Diaz, was barely interested in fighting Dan Hooker. He eventually fought him because he needed a payday. He needed a win. He's a man that is scared of nobody. But again, Dan Hooker is a very skilled and dangerous fighter and not the biggest name. So usually the stars don't want to be in those type of fights. Again, it's the money-weight division for Nate Diaz. Terrence Levriette, and he donated $50 to the Super Chat. I forgot about that. The Super Chat's open. If you want to support this channel, you can, like Terrence. But Terrence, thank you so much for your donation. And Terrence asks, do you think Dana isn't doing post-fight press because he didn't want to answer questions about Dustin not getting contract yet and Aljo Yan not being booked? Also, this is for you to buy liquor for your house. Cheers. Thank you, sir. I will certainly do that. No. I think Dana White, for example, will come out after... Maybe. I don't know exactly Dana White's availability, but if he doesn't do a presser after Ortega versus Zombie, which is a big fight, he's definitely going to do one after UFC 254, the title fight. Really, Dana White, and you can say the same thing for Scott Coker. They really only go to events and do interviews and do media surrounding big events. And I love the Corey Sandhagen versus Marlon Moraes matchup, but that wasn't a big event. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think that he's avoiding interviews or whatever. I mean, if they ask him that, he can always just say, I don't know. I mean, he does that when he doesn't want to answer some questions. I mean, he generally sometimes doesn't know, but I also think there's some of that as well. But anyways, and he's never been afraid to like answer to the media. I mean, even I don't know. I mean, he's never been afraid to do that. So I don't think that's sort of the reason why Dana White hasn't been doing press. But yeah, and then again, he's never afraid to talk about, you know, negotiations and all that. I mean, at one point he was asked about Dustin Poirier wanting more money, and he basically said he negotiated himself out of that fight, basically by saying he didn't want the fight, and that's a way that you pull out of a fight, by negotiating yourself out. So again, he's not afraid to discuss those type of topics. So I don't think so, Terrence. But yeah, I would like to see reporters press on him on Aldo Yan. I know a lot of people. I mean, on Aldo Yan. I know a lot of people have already. And he actually said at one point, like, yeah, Aljamain's next, but time keeps ticking, and that fight is not being booked. So I don't know what's happening. I have a theory, and again, this is not backed by any knowledge whatsoever, so keep that in mind. So Cody Garbrandt pulled out of the flyweight title bout, apparently reporting a bicep injury, right? I think if he's able to return fairly quickly, and if he sort of dismisses interest at fighting at 125, it wouldn't surprise me. It really wouldn't. If he would get a title shot at 135, it wouldn't surprise me. And skip Aljamain. We'll see. But yeah, I hope the UFC makes that fight with Aljamain Sterling, because that's the fight to make, 100%. And he deserves it, man. He's been grinding. He's been fighting. And yeah, I mean, it just makes complete sense. I don't know why you wouldn't make that fight, but we'll see what happens. And then as far as Dustin not getting a contract, he did. He got a contract to fight McGregor, at least according to Dana White. And Dustin said he accepted. McGregor said he accepted. But the condition is to fight in 2020. So we'll see if the UFC bends the knee, no pun intended, and books that fight for 2020 or 2021. We'll see. Scott Brown, is Dana waiting for boxing to have fans in Texas before he stages full events in Florida? I don't know. He's say what you want about Dana, about like what he believes about the pandemic, or how he's handled everything, especially at the beginning stages. Certainly now they're doing a good job at handling everything. And I feel pretty good about watching fights. The fans thing is an interesting one. I mean, Bellator had fans over the weekend in France. I mean, they were scattered. It was like, I think like 20% capacity or something like that. Texas is allowing, I think, 50% capacity at arenas. Honestly, I don't think, in my personal opinion, I don't think that's all that bad. I don't want to see a packed shoulder-to-shoulder arena. But again, bars and restaurants are opening with low capacity. I was just in Colombia last week, and Colombia has opened indoor dining at low capacity, and I felt pretty safe eating. And I took 2 COVID tests and tested positive for both. Again, tables were really distant, so I wouldn't hate it if the UFC were to go to Texas and have like 30-40% capacity at an arena, and make sure that everyone's spread out, and make sure when everyone does get out of the arena that it's by groups, by sections, so you don't get crowds, right? Make sure you have dividers at wherever you get your snacks or your drinks, so there's some social distancing. Temperature checks at the entrance. Like I wouldn't be opposed to that. I don't think that'd be a bad thing. Again, I think it's all about, and something that Dana White did discuss is, we need to find ways on how to like live normal. I think his normal was like no COVID test, let's just have fights, which is not good. But I do agree with the sense of that was at least at the beginning of the pandemic. But I do agree with with that notion of like, look, this thing's here. We need to discuss and figure out how to like live our lives the best that we can normally, while also being considered, considering sort of the health factors and the health risks that a pandemic presents. So certainly while being responsible as well and taking measures to prevent the spread, right? But yeah, again, masks, temperature checks, spread out, groups or whatever. I'm in for that. I wouldn't feel comfortable. I would feel comfortable with that, but we'll see. But yeah, I don't know what sort of the laws here in Florida. I know that in Texas they're opening up things for sports to return at like 50% capacity. I don't know about Florida, but I know the governor recently passed a thing where like masks are no longer mandatory, and that's kind of problematic. I think we'll see. I mean, everything's open. You can go to a club and it's like packed, shoulder to shoulder. But yeah. All right. Sir, are you still reading our comments? Yes, I am. For a couple more minutes, and then I'm bouncing. Hopefully Venom puts out merch that we can afford. LOL. Reebok was charging too much for that, for a shirt. I think so. Yeah, I think Reebok was quite expensive from what I remember. We'll see. But MMA apparel historically has always been expensive, from what I can remember. Training shorts, shirts, etc. It's always been kind of pricey. All right. Yeah, so that does it for the questions. I appreciate everybody that submitted questions via Twitter. Also, everyone who participated on the YouTube live chat. Thank you very much. Remember, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share it. I'll retweet you, all that good stuff. Share you on the Instagram stories, whatever. And yeah, share it with your friends. That's a good way on how to spread the word for this program and how to make it grow. Appreciate everybody who donated. Shouts out to Terrence. And yeah, again, subscribe, like. I'll be back next week, Tuesday at 10:30. Usually that's the date. Those are the time and days that I do these live Q&As. But if there's any sort of changes, I'll obviously note on that. I'll put a note on that on my Twitter and my personal social media. So make sure you're following me on Twitter, Instagram, at Danny Segura TV, right here. There you go. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got, guys. So I'll see you guys next week. Peace.